Hi, I'm Jeremy Brewer, Senior Azure Architect at Emergent Software, a Microsoft Gold partner. Today I'm going to be bringing you over Part 2, what to expect during your cloud migration. In Part 1 of this series, we discussed essentially our business justifications and why we're doing this migration in the first place. Now we're going to be discussing how we do this and what to expect during this process. The first place that we start is an Azure Landing Zone. An Azure Landing Zone is an environment that's hosting our workloads. It doesn't distinguish between infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. It's a place that we define our security governance, our network, and our identity and other items. When I'm working with clients, we start off with regions. We discuss where our primary region is going to be, such as production, and then we discuss where our secondary region is, which is primarily for disaster recovery. Some clients have multiple regions that could be primary regions because they are maybe globally dispersed. And through that process, we do need to determine where the disaster recovery regions are going to be for all of those primary regions. It makes a lot of sense to pick paired regions with the Azure data centers. So for example, if we choose to have our primary region in North Central US, then the paired region that Microsoft sets up is going to be in South Central. Now, we don't have to choose South Central as our DR region. If you have maybe another office location that makes more sense, we can choose an Azure region near there. But typically it makes a lot of sense to use the paired region. The next thing we do is we go over naming conventions. A lot of the Microsoft Azure assets, such as storage and networking, have unique naming conventions that need to be adhered to. So for example, with storage, we can't use capital letters. So when you are viewing the assets in the portal, you need to keep this in account, that some things cannot be named the same way. If you don't have an idea of what you want to use, or you don't have something on premise right now that you use, I'd recommend taking a look at the documentation from Microsoft. They have a great idea on how to name some of your assets to make sure that it spans over the lifetime of your deployment. When I'm working with clients, I like to extend their Active Directory domain out to the cloud. And this might mean putting a small domain controller that's replicating out to this region. We do this for a couple reasons. The first off, it's a good protection for your on-premise domain, so that way we have a paired domain controller with all of the identity management there. But then secondarily, we're ready to start deploying assets or testing assets as soon as that's there. Another item that we'll discuss during the landing zone preparation and deployment is networking. We're going to be talking about IP space, so what network or networks are going to be present in Azure. One thing keeping in mind that Microsoft Azure does not support overlapping networks. So if you have defined a large network on your on-premise or have the potential of connecting up to multiple different networks through site-to-site VPNs or ExpressRoute, we need to keep in mind that the address space in Azure needs to be unique and routable. We're going to also discuss such items as DMZs. Do you need to have a DMZ in your Azure environment? Do you have any internet exposed applications that need extra protection? Putting a DMZ into Azure can be done through a few different ways, and primarily the recommended way is going to be using a NVA, which is a network virtual appliance. Companies such as Palo Alto and Meraki have virtual appliances that you can put into the environment and route all the traffic through that as you would on-premise. The Azure migration process looks like this. We start with an assessment phase, a migration phase, an optimization phase, and then we end with a secure and manage phase. Starting with a process called the Power of 10, we will take your 10 top applications that are ready for migration and prioritize them. Prioritizing your applications for migration follows that phase outline that I just described. So what we'll do first is a digital estate and eligibility review, and this is done with either first-party or third-party tools. For me, I typically use the Azure migration tools built into the Azure portal. For a lot of clients, this means deploying a virtual appliance into their environment, allowing it to grab telemetry for performance reasons such as disk and CPU and memory. We're also looking at churn, how much data changes on that machine from day to day. Do remember, we're going to need to replicate these machines if that is one of the chosen methods. From there, the report will help us determine what the actual size of the machine should be in Azure. We find a lot of times that deployed assets in your data centers are typically larger than they need to be due to the ability and ubiquity of extra resources. Typically speaking, I'll grab at least a couple weeks of data if the project allows for this. We're going to understand better what the performance necessities are for these assets. The output of the report will allow us to do better cost analysis of the workloads, understanding which SKUs are going to be used, how much storage, what performance of storage, and how much network is going to be consumed on each asset allows us to better estimate what the total cost is going to be. Once the workloads are assessed, the next step is to determine what the process is for each migration. There are several options to us, both again through first party and third party. Azure Site Recovery allows us the ability to replicate the machines in near real time to Microsoft Azure. And instead of doing the process for a disaster recovery, we can actually use it such as migration. Using that tool, the OVA or Hyper-V virtual machine that gets deployed on-premise, it grabs the block data changes, which is the changes used on the virtual hard drive, and replicates that to Microsoft Azure and helps create a mirror copy of your environment. For those customers who have very large deployments or very large data needs, there are several different options. And one of them is DataBox. In certain circumstances, the infrastructure is not the issue, but a lot of times the databases can be the issue. Is a database migration service specific for these types of needs. They do follow a similar process of either replicating to Microsoft Azure through things such as SQL Always On, or again through the DataBox service. When reviewing the environment, every application and asset is going to go through a process of invest, maintain, or retire. We need to label each one of these applications and asset pieces to determine, are we going to continue to invest money into this? Is this something that provides us a lot of value, this particular application? An ERP system or a web service may be invaluable to the organization, and so therefore it will get migrated. Something else might be in a maintenance mode where it's still core to your production, but you don't plan to actually optimize or enhance or continue to invest in the service, at least for some period of time. And then lastly, an application that might be getting retired. So something that used to be an archive or legacy system that has no value to being migrated will have a different path in this journey. With those steps, we've prioritized our first 10 applications and we're ready to begin our first workload migration. This workload, for example, is going to be low impact. The application owner is going to be supportive of the project. We already have our landing zone ready. The application is well maintained. It has limited complexity, limited dependencies, and limited exposure. After the migration is complete, we're going to do a postmortem of the migration project. The process that we just went through was purely academic. We wanted to test our process. We wanted to learn as a group, so both the staff and the partner. And then we're going to take these learnings and enhance our process. We're expecting that there's going to be problems, which is why we keep a tight feedback loop. With feedback from the end users, from all of the application owners, and the partner all together, quickly we'll be able to fix any of the issues that we've run into for future projects. From there, that's when we get into the next 9 applications. These next 9 applications will have increased complexity and dependencies and exposure. We're going to be testing out various different parts of this process. So for example, if the first application didn't experience any network changes, we may choose an application that has low complexity and low exposure, but maybe complex networking requirements in order to make sure that our process is still sound. By doing this, we will cover a vast majority of complex projects, allowing us to have more successful deployments as everything gets either larger or more complex. Thanks for watching the video. We hope you found it insightful as you prepare for your digital transformation journey. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it and stay tuned for more videos on this topic by subscribing to our channel. For more information or questions about working with Emergent software, visit our website at emergentsoftware.net.